Hello YouTube, it's Thursday and this is Veteran Mountain Man, and I'm going to start a new segment today, and that segment is going to involve spiritualism. For those of you who don't know, I'm actually a practicing pagan. I'm registered with the state I'm in, that's the state of Oregon, and I actually perform marriages and burial rites for pagan groups here in the Pacific Northwest. And I actually don't charge because I believe that the spiritual aspect of the human existence is something that shouldn't cost in the traditional monetary sense. So I don't do it as my primary objective. It's something I do when I'm called for to do it. However, I have been hearing a lot lately that paganism, and specifically neo-paganism, such as Wiccans and traditionalistic pagans that have had a resurgence since the 1960s, are a liberal group. And what I want to bring forward is actually they are truly an anti-authoritarian, traditionalistic, conservatistic group. And here's why. So, when we look at classic cultures and the concept of paganism, which has kind of been passed down since the Roman Empire, because the Romans, they had their own structural beliefs before Christianity, and those were not considered paganistic beliefs. They were considered Roman state religion. And the pagans were the people who lived outside of the cities. Well, these people lived relatively harsh lives. I mean, they had to grow their own food. They had to tend to themselves. And they also had to tend to their spiritual needs, because the priests in the temples were in the cities. So your daily spiritual concepts and your teachings and your understandings were managed at your home shrine, in your hearth. And you practiced a form of spirituality that gave you a connection to the earth. And that meant you had to understand what it meant to conserve resources. And one of the fundamental concepts of conservatism as a political standpoint is the holding on of individual freedoms and choices and expressions over a state concept that brought them down from on high, a centralized concept that everyone has to adhere to. So when you look at the movements of modern paganism, neo-paganism, Wiccan, witchcraft, and even modern Satanism, all of these aspects are extremely conservative in that they want absolute freedom of ideas and expressions and capabilities within their system. They want to practice what they believe and not have anybody change what they believe to reach to a centralized system. Now, these groups gather in covens or in small organizations, and they practice communally. But even within these organizations, you see derivations of the belief structure. They just hold communistic rituals in which they behave in a agreed-upon fashion that has been worked out. And that is kind of the centralized concept of conservative groups coming together to form political parties within systems. Most conservative parties have desperate groups of individuals that have come together under basic overarching concepts. And we'll take one for example. Let's take the right to bear arms in the United States. I know this is a hot button issue because a lot of people are like, oh, but the school shootings and the loss of life. Yes, but let me ask you this. Have you ever lived in a county where the police response time was an hour? I have. In fact, I lived closer to the earth when I was in that county. because people were growing food and raising livestock and having to defend that livestock from predators, and also to be able to defend what they were growing, what they were making to feed themselves and create their own sustenance. They had to be able to defend it from those who would take it from them, because the criminals knew that the response time was an hour too, because it took an hour to get from the sheriff's station out to where the farm was, because it was that far. And even if the police stepped on it and did 90 miles an hour, it only cut it down to 25 minutes. So the person could literally, if you weren't able to defend yourself, walk into your home with a gun on you because you were sitting there in the kitchen cooking and had your door open because you had to get in and out of the pantry out in the outside storage shed. They'd walk in with a gun on you and steal you blind. And if you couldn't have a gun to defend yourself, well, they could still walk in with a knife. Well, what happens if you're like, say, an associate of mine? Her name's Mary. She lives out in the middle of nowhere in Washington State right now. She's 5'4". Her husband just passed. If she couldn't have a gun, a 6-foot man who lives 4 or 5 plots of lands away could walk into her house and rob her blind of everything she owns, could do horrible things to her. She's a practicing pagan. She and I were just together the other day, and I was talking to her about her firearm collection because her husband owned and gathered and stored firearms. And we were discussing what she should keep and what she should get rid of, because he had quite a number of duplicate firearms. And I was explaining to her how certain calibers were going to advantage her better than others, because I've studied how they go together and what they do. And this is because I was concerned for her, because as a fellow pagan, I need to help her stand on her own so she can be as independent as she wants. And that doesn't mean that I come in and I dictate to her, but I converse with her, and I interact in a dialogue with her. And this once again comes back to these conservative principles, the ability to conserve infinitely your own freedom. And that only comes with dialogue and the mindset of, I am free and I have the right to be free, and therefore I have to be able to take care of myself, which all comes back to personal responsibility, because your religious practices dictate optimum personal responsibility as to what you're going to practice, which divine entities you're going to pray to, which one you feel is appropriate to entreat on this particular issue. And if you don't, then you're not truly a pagan. You're just following a religion like the book religions. You're being dictated to from up on high. And that's not true paganism. That is not having your own altar and taking responsibility for your own spiritual practices and setting your own prayers. That is mimicry, the basis of the concept of idolatry. That's central planning. That's not paganism. Well, I want to thank you all for joining me on this Spiritual Thursday as I help you unburden your souls and bring you some understandings of the paganistic philosophies as I see them and how they interact with political philosophies as well. I'm going to leave a link below to my minds.com/Veteran Mountain Man account, as well as a link below to my vid.me/Veteran Mountain Man, so that you can interact with me, or you can leave a comment below. I'm doing this for an individual who asked me to do a dissertation on minds.com. His name is Unbound Pagan, and I'm going to send him the right to use this podcast because he wants to use it as part of his political discourse website on paganism and conservative ideas. Thank you all, and have a good day.